Hey ho! This is Septi, and Madness Project Nexus is a game that has been in development for over 6 years by a small group of people, based on the original Madness Combat series made by Crinkles. This more story-focused game offers a great variety of ways to shoot, stab, crush, dismember, and otherwise lethally deal with thousands of opponents throughout this hack-and-slash shoot-em-up masterpiece of an indie game. With hundreds of weapons to choose from, you can make every playthrough a different kind of amusing bloody massacre. But what if we choose to play a game without resorting to any form of weaponry to make short work of our enemies? Can you beat Madness Project Nexus with only unarmed attacks? Now, if you're not familiar with how these challenges usually work, it's actually quite simple. The selected game must be finished with a predetermined handicap, and we'll find out if that makes the game very challenging or downright impossible to finish under set circumstances. This is a challenge series popularized by the Mitten Squad channel, so following his example, we're going to set up some rules for the playthrough of this game. Here it goes. 1. I can only attack enemies with unarmed melee attacks, such as punch, kick, swing, and execution moves. 2. I am only allowed to use weaponry to solve puzzle elements. This includes grenades as well. As you will find out later, there are certain parts in the game where a melee or ranged weapon is a requirement in order to proceed. However, as long as I don't use it against any opponents that are trying to kill me, I'm still good to go. 3. Any kills done by my allies in combat will be completely disconnected from my challenge. I am unable to stop them from picking up weapons and using them against our enemies. This will come back later, so remember this rule. 4. Any magical attacks that can be done by characters like Dr. Christoph will be counted as an unarmed attack, as it doesn't require any form of weaponry in order to perform. However, the same rules does not apply to holy grenades, meaning throwable items are not allowed to be used on enemies by me. And finally, if under any circumstances I fail to follow the rules mentioned prior and I personally kill a single opponent by disallowed means, that would mean I have failed the challenge and I have to start the level from the latest checkpoint. With that out of the way, let us begin. The game starts with an ominous vision of the director playing Dollhouse in the other place, biding his time. Moving on, our story begins somewhere in Nevada, of course. Hank and his allies have the AAHW hot on our tail, so we gotta dispose of them. Demo suggests that I should grab a weapon, and I blissfully ignored him, because no one tells Hank what to do. After dealing with the agency goons, some bandits decided to play silly buggers with a few rocks, and that caused us to fall off the cliff.
Huh?
So now that we're on foot, taking out some bandits with sneak attacks, Burger Jill broke the fourth wall by telling me I can use shift for heavy attacks. I followed his advice. Moving forward, for the first time, I was forced to use a gun in order to proceed with the game. I took out the bandits outside, used the gun to lower the bridge, then left it behind me. The rest of the level went as you would expect. More hand-to-hand with some bandits, then the agency showed up at the junkyard. They didn't pose much of a threat. In fact, even the Raiders can beat them in a fight. I eventually made it to the end of the level. Bashed a few more heads in the first hub, then I started power play. Looking for the control room, we successfully established the fact that Hank is in fact not a hacker man. I tried destroying the generator with my bare hands to no avail, so I had to use a melee weapon to destroy it. As mentioned before, any form of weaponry is only allowed to be used for puzzle elements and nothing else, so technically I should be good. I hopped inside the vents, found the keycard, and met Rick, the employee of the month. I blissfully destroyed his life of work by shutting down the power so I can reach the inner city walls. On my way out, I was ambushed by the agency. I kicked their asses with ease. Finished the level, and now we're facing the sheriff for the first time, who looks pretty good for someone who was shot in the face with a shotgun beforehand. Then I had to face the first boss in the game, the Mag Bandit. And let me tell you, I nearly got my ass handed to me. See, relying on a weak unarmed attack can only do so much damage, and not being quick on my feet caused me to fly across the screen multiple times. I had to spend 7 minutes punching the beast before he was finally knocked out. Sanford and Deimos arrived, the Mag Bandit threw a fit and knocked down the gate, and we finished the mission. We learned from a flashback that Jeb and the Sheriff were up to no good to stop the director of Project Nexus, so they teamed up with the Mather Energy Reclamation Corporation, otherwise known as the Merc, or new friends to play with for the next chapter. We make it to the factory district, and decided to go do his research on his own, so now we're taking control of Sanford and Deimos, and we're ready to start Warehouse Raid. Inside, I threw my weapons away pronto. I performed a few sneak attacks, beat the Merc into submission with my Fists of Fury, beat a few more grunts in the computer room, and the mission was finished. Next up, the Boom Factory. We started the mission, some idiot got himself killed by stepping on the flame exhaust, a subtle detail you'd normally miss if you go in guns blazing. The same ordeal continued. I tried to see if I can get my ally to solve the puzzle for me, but programming a reliable AI like that is much more than I should have expected. You'll hear me say that again later. I solved the puzzle, the bridge lowered, we went to the next room, and it was time for the next boss fight against George and Church, the Gunner twins. Given by limitations, I figured George would be an easier target due to the fact he's using ranged weapons instead of charging head-on. Church joined the party, knocked over his brother like a tank, and sent him flying across the Twilight Zone. Eventually, I managed to beat them both, cleared out the factory, and the mission was finished. Now that we got our hands on some explosives, we could blast a hole into the fortress, where we can finally face the sheriff himself. A couple of bash heads later, I've run into the first real issue in the game, a sniper. Normally you would have to take out the high position marksman with either a firearm or a throwable item, but since I cannot access either of those, I have to wait for my ally to do the job for me. In case you couldn't tell, the AI is not very competent in doing that. I spent over 4 minutes waiting in this room for Sanford to finally kill that single sniper, and that's when I realized I might be in trouble. Since look no further than a few rooms away, my worst nightmare has arrived. 2 snipers. Much like in the previous room, I had to wait forever for the AI to take out the enemies out of my reach, which was followed by another room with yet another marksman waiting in it. This challenge has become my misery real fast. I've reached the incendiary. The sheriff decided to play smart this time and put on a welding mask, because he's a real fan of that space. We asked him nicely to let us into the city to break havoc. He rudely rejected the offer, which will earn him a good ass kicking. And with that, the first phase of the boss fight begins. This is the second time when I felt like I might have failed the challenge, as the only way to damage the sheriff is by moving the cranes and dropping the boxes on his head. Then I've realized this is more of a puzzle mechanic, so I'm letting it slide for now. You're free to disagree with me in the comment section below. The sheriff dared me to take it outside, so we did exactly that. And as soon as he saw us, he ran like a little bitch. For the next session, we have to survive waves of mercs until one of them drops the explosives that Sanford can use to proceed to the next stage. 2 waves later, a gunner accused us of being employer goons, we rearranged his face as a response, confronted the sheriff, and with nowhere else to go, he was ready to finally face us. We beat him into submission, we finally got it through his thick skull that we're not here for the bounty on his head, he let us pass to the inner city, and we were ready to start the next mission. This place was overrun by survivor bandits who resorted to cannibalism, but we made short work of them with our fist. Just a few rooms in, Sanford and Deimos decided the place was too stinky for their liking, so they had to put a gas mask on. We interrupted the garbage fire gathering led by a brute when a rock almost fell on our head, and that somehow made them think the collapsing building was our fault. We peacefully settled all differences, handled more of them on the balcony area while looking for a keycard. I wasn't sure which one was the right one, so I just took all of them for good measure. We cleared out the final room, and the mission was finished. Next up, beat the streets. The place was overrun by Zeds. The game suggested I should use grenades to take care of them. Instead, I just jumped down and gave them the good old slap hands. We went downstairs, held off an army of P-heads while waiting for the elevator to arrive. The same thing happened on the inside. Outside the building, the streets were full of emergency beacons, which upon activation will alert a horde of Zeds. So I tried my best to avoid them. Emphasis on tried, because one of the flesh-eating assholes thought it would be funny to run through the alarms, so I would have to find them anyway. We took care of a few more bandits, ended up in the sewers, a place we returned to later. We tried and failed to avoid more beacons, and ended up in the Martinex. We killed a few Zerified customers because nobody stands in our way during Black Friday. We pulled our number, Jill picked up our order, little did we know he was planning to turn us into meat patties, until he didn't, as we eventually put him out of his misery, and the mission was completed. We decided to take the scenic route, fought more Zeds and bandits alike, until we ended up in the sewers, where we met these disgusting swamp zombies who liked to puke on us. Gross. We entered the big quiet room. The big boy from earlier was ready for seconds, and I was not. Thankfully, with an AI on my side, it was easier to defeat him the second time. In the next room, I was forced to once again use a firearm to destroy the generator so we can open the gates. We passed through the sewers, and our old friends made a return. George and Church were also ready for round 2, so were the mercs, as they followed right behind. This time we faced a much more opposing threat. I tried avoiding becoming roast chicken by George's flamethrower. George chased me all over the room. I had to snap their necks 3 times before they'd say uncle. We called the elevator in the next room, and the mission was completed. We got another flashback. I threw a rock to distract this Oblivion NPC. He went back to tell his friends about it. I sneaked through the compound, activated the virus that started the Z outbreak, and continued playing as Hank for the next chapter. I looked through Christoph's fanfiction collection with nothing of value. They were so wild in fact, I ended up in a mental asylum next. Had to brawl with a couple of patients on the inside, met a few British doctors who were ready to drug me, and had to smash a vent to avoid the turrets. Then, I faced the third controversial moment during this challenge. There's a bunch of turrets blocking my way, and the game won't let me pass unless I blow up the barrels and destroy them. With no other option, I labeled this as another puzzle element in order to proceed. During my brawl with the orderlies, one of them gave me the needle that made me see bubbles around me. Had to face another big one on the way, made short work of the rest. I entered the laboratory and read more of Christoph's fanfictions. He wasn't happy about it, so he challenged me to a Shaolin showdown. Using punches and kicks in a gun, sword and holy grenade fight was not the best tactical choice, but I came out on top at the end. After we settled all differences, we decided to find the third and final rowdy rough boy located in the sleeper labs. I used telekinesis to grab the keycard and shut down the turrets. Took care of a few more patients. I got introduced to the sleepwalkers. Their electronic devices prevent them from dying at least 2 times, so it's recommended to try and take it off, since they explode the 3rd time you knock them out. On the lower level, the game suggested I should use holy grenades to destroy the turrets, but I've had a better idea in mind. I sent Hank forward to get himself killed while I passed by the turrets, like a true frenemy would. We dealt with more patients inside of a small arena. We ran into a big boy with big dreams. We've made his existence pre-turret. More of the same waves of enemies later, we've bumped into a familiar place from arena combat. Hank volunteered to take the lead on the medic so we can open the door. It's okay, he's used to dying anyway. A bit later, we found ourselves in Tricky's murder time fun time house. The premise of this fight is simple. You have to survive 3 deadly waves until the timer runs out, something I failed to do the first time. The second time I made it to the end. Tricky was about to turn us into sushi with his lasers when the party crashers arrived. That filled Tricky's hate boner so much that he was willing to join us in the fight against Nexus just for the end of this mission. Now that we know what we're looking for, it's off to deep storage. We beat up a few Nexus goons, disposed of the generator by using forbidden items. More of the same happened until we encountered the half-baked potatoes known as the unfinished mags. After an extended amount of meat pounding, we found ourselves in the chamber of Project Gestalt. Christoph suggests we should make a run for it, as he runs up to said monster to attack it. We bump into the first golem enemy and quickly dispose of it so we can proceed. We tried to take the elevator, then Gestalt broke the 4th wall and forced us to destroy the monolith so we can shove him down in the mining sector. We got a flashback of Phobos having a Trump moment after calling Jack to his office.
I'm sorry, you're fired. Get out of here.
Speaking of the mining sector, we're back to playing as Sanford and Deimos, ready to start flood control. Inside, we ran into a bunch of dream stands who don't take kindly to trespassers, so we had to mop the floor with them in order to proceed. More Zeds showed up to the party as the place was falling apart, we turned off the grinder, a couple of waves later, we started turning on the water pumps. Before we could turn it off completely, guess who came back for a third time? During this fight, they have no backup until you take care of at least one of them, but that doesn't necessarily make the fight any easier, since normally you would pick up weapons from fallen enemies to deplete their health faster, which is not an option during this playthrough, combined with the fact the arena is very narrow this time around. I eventually beat them, turned on the water pump, and the mission was finished. Now we delve into the chasms, where we get to see the end result of eating too much ass. We take care of the abominations, turn the lights on to scare them away while we do our thing. A few waves of fanatics, abominations and Zeds later, I located more explosives in the middle of a rumble and got past more baddies. And we found ourselves in the domains of Dr. Crackpot, the cult leader. He doesn't take kindly to heretics, so now we have to whoop his ass in the old-fashioned way. He teleports all over the place with his crack magic, but we eventually get the best of him. Just as he declared himself as unstoppable, we got reunited with our old pal Gestalt, which is our ticket to get the hell out of there. But since he doesn't skip leg day, we're in some real trouble. We spend the next 2.5 minutes avoiding his attacks while fending off more fanatics, until we finally get to jump off the wagon, which means we can finally infiltrate the tower soon, entering the last leg as our next mission. Inside, we deal with a couple of buckleheads and other abominations on the way there. As we're getting closer, the Nexus core has been alerted to our presence, and that means we're in some trouble. The riot guards were especially annoying to deal with due to their shields deflecting my attacks. Sometime later, I had to face yet another controversial moment during this challenge. The breach can only be lowered via hand grenades, so with no other options, I threw 2 grenades at the core so we can proceed. I tried to kick down as many goons as possible off the cliff to make my job easier, I dealt with 2 golems, and finally reached the monolith. But it wasn't over yet, as we had to face off against the ghoul. I actually died during this encounter at least once. But we eventually got the better of him. We arrived upstairs, Tricky jumped in the window to have an epic boss fight against us. That lasted 5 seconds before he got bored and yeeted right back to where he came from. We got another flashback, learned Hank hasn't gotten better at driving since episode 4, to be damned, wanted Hank and Jeb to have a truce and work together to destroy Project Nexus, but he wasn't convinced until recent times. The group finally reunites at the entrance of the science tower. Deimos was glad to see Hank, but he doesn't care about anything that doesn't involve violence. Rip. After a great conversation that revealed nothing new about the mission, we could finally start base jumping. On the inside, we were greeted by a friendly concierge. We signed some paperwork, the guys waiting upstairs were not so friendly. More of the same beat-em-up sequence took place, then a tower guard broke through the wall and challenged us to a duel. It didn't put up much of a fight. The same cannot be said about this unfinished mag, but I eventually got past him. A few rooms later, another big boy challenged me, only to fail miserably. I found myself in a room where I was swarmed by Nexus agents. After making them history, we took care of a group of unarmored golems, as well as another unfinished mag, then we were facing off against the Black Guard. I got Deimos to hack the mainframe, and one of the robots blew up in the Blackguard's face, but he was still invincible. We ripped off his helmet, looked for explosives, planted them in the black of his armor, found out he most likely suffers from anorexia based on how skinny he is. We damaged him enough so he would give up on the sword fighting and pulled out a minigun, and we eventually put him down. Outside, the team decided it would be a good idea to split up, so I began shakedown with Deimos and Christoph. We were not welcome on the inside, so the next logical step was to play with Wally while Hank was in trouble downstairs. I opened the door with the keycard, heard a loud crash, and we met our rival once again. Since we're a bunch of chicken shit compared to him, we've decided to make a run for it while avoiding Nexus goons. He jumped out the window and became Hank's problem for the next mission to come, but we don't talk about that just yet. A few more waves and the last tower guard later, we are facing off against the Hive. The fight was more of a matter of patience than skill. Just have to avoid his rockets and grubs that came from his belly and damage him until he rage quits so hard that it makes his head explode. Now we go back for a bit to see what happened to Hank during the climb. The attendant refused to give me service, but I persisted until a secret golem arrived. The core was so scared of Hank, they resorted to calling the AAHW from the beginning for backup. They arrived in a matter of seconds, out to get Hank. In fact, it only took them a few minutes to infiltrate the entire facility and pop out from every single corner to kill me, to no avail. In the next session, I had to switch between Hank fending off the agency upstairs, while Sanford was struggling against the Nexus core. I managed to keep both of them alive, and had to be very careful not to shoot the engineer defending the generator, otherwise this run would be over. I skipped out on the dissonant weaponry, found myself facing a mag agent on the helipad who put up quite the fight. Hordes of enemies later, I spent long minutes trying to figure out this puzzle before I was jumped by more agency goons. We faced off against 2 more mag agents before we reached the closed bridge, so we had to radio Christoph to tell him we're in trouble. He must have taken his sweet time walking up those stairs while we were facing off an entire army downstairs. And the fun wasn't over yet, since as the game tells you, the AAHW refuses to die. I spent a good while disposing all of their troops and the last mag agents when suddenly Gestalt landed on the helipad, but thanks to his big weight, he fell off right away. There was no time for celebration though, as I looked down and saw him coming right for me.
Oh! Oh, he's calling! No! Please, 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 please! Oh god, he's so fast! He's so fast! He's so horny for me, bro! I hate this bitch!
We were fending off enemies as long as we could. Eventually Gestalt managed to crawl all the way back up, just chilling in the corner, until the bridge was finally lowered so we could make our escape. Fun fact, if you're playing this game on easy mode like I am to see if this challenge is even possible to begin with, you will face no enemies using this lift, while normally you would have one less agency ambush. Just something I thought I'd point out. We scared off the goons, created almost C4, blew up the filter array, and we were ready to start the final mission, the rush. This was it. The only thing standing in our way were the escaped horrors of Project Nexus. I maintained my strategy of letting my allies take care of whoever they can using their forbidden weapons while I punched the hell out of everything. Next up, we were facing off against robo-dogs equipped with dissonant cannons, followed by a fight against 4 dissonant golems who were masters of playing peekaboo during this fight. We got past them, scared off a few cyber bandits, the museum came to life and started attacking us, we entered the robot arena and defeated all the champions, and finally, we reached the Nexus charters. We've successfully established the fact that Director Phobos is dead, or alive. Jeb told us to meet upstairs. As we were about to begin, George and Church made their final return, and I do mean final, since Gestalt rudely interrupted their warm-up before we could fight.
Next time. More orifices, the better.
Now we're facing Gestalt. I had to plug in the machine that would extract dissonance from his body so we could temporarily damage him. I depleted 2 blocks of his health, and then I had to realize something. Gestalt summons tentacles that hold off the upper plugs, and the only way to get rid of them is by shooting. I tried throwing the plug at it to no avail. I tried commanding my allies to do the job for me. There was nothing I could do. I came so far only to face defeat. But then I thought the tentacles on the ground can attack me, while the ones up there cannot. Therefore, shooting them down would serve as a puzzle. With that loophole in mind, I got rid of the tentacles, punched Gestalt into submission one more time before he was shot out of the tower, but the bastard kept mutating and now he has wings. Normally, you'd have to use the big weapons right next to you to damage him, but I just let my allies do the job for me while I dodge his attacks. Gestalt was put to the ground, Phobos emerged from the inside, and the final boss fight began. Phobos is the hardest boss fight in the game. Even in the easiest mode of the game, he can kill you by the final phase. You need to be quick on your feet when he is using dash moves, teleport attacks, and projectiles. I actually died here. Great. After doing the same hoo-ha again, I tried to be more careful on my second attempt. It took me nearly 10 minutes, but I finally defeated him with unarmed attacks. He whined about not wanting to go back to his room. Sanford planted explosives on Gestol's face. We beat him until his face exploded, and we finished the final mission. Christoph congratulated us. He plans to revamp the project to his original purpose to do something good to turn the fate of Nevada, but Hank wasn't gonna have any of that, as he insists the project cannot exist in any shape or form, even if we end up destroying the entire city, so he yeeted him off the balcony. Sanford and Demos scolded him plenty for not paying attention that the project was already destroyed, but Hank had other plans in mind. He revealed to us that this whole time he's been looking for an excuse to get rid of us, so the real final fight could begin. He jumped into a vent and started shooting at us from the ceiling. I waited until he jumped down so I could damage him. He was overconfident after defeating a demigod, so he barely even tried at this point. I gave him the final killing blow. Hank was dead once again. We've come to the conclusion there is no way to restore the project without Christoph. The doc won't be happy about having to bring Hank back from the dead again, but we completed the mission and the world was saved. The end credits rolled, and I, for the most part, kind of beat Madness Project Nexus, with only using unarmed attacks. I'll be honest, we had to loosen the rules by a lot to even make it to the very end. If you believe I failed the challenge and the game cannot be beaten in such a way, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. If you want to suggest similar challenges for any other games or even this one, be sure to tell me about it. And as always, I shall continue to make more videos whenever I get the chance, but until then, I'm Septi, and goodbye.